Maximum Downforce on Downforce Radio, brought to you by Classic Race Simulators.
Go, go, go! And it's happened immediately! This is amazing! The worst start for a Grand Prix that I have ever seen in the whole of my life. He's out of the race! He's out of the race! Oh my goodness! This is fantastic! And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Maximum Downforce, episode 21 of the official 2021 Formula One World Championship. I'm your host, Will Knight. Joining me, as always, Alex Bomberg, Lisanne Dijk, and Ryan Ferris. And for the very first time, Maximum Downforce is brought to you by Classic Race Simulators. Ryan, you were with me the other day when we went over on Wednesday to test out some of these simulators. They were very good machinery, weren't they?
Oh, indeed, it is a fantastic machine. Has fantastic machinery. It was a fantastic facility, and the guys over at Classic Race Simulators, they did a really brilliant job of making us at home with what was potentially like sitting in a historic race car, but was a bit safer.
Oh, certainly, indeed. And I don't think I'd be any good at driving a real race car with the way I performed in a virtual one. But either way, let's crack on with the Formula One World Championship. Lisanne, I'll start with you. Formula One's inaugural trip to Saudi Arabia. Just walk me through how you think it went.
Well, what a chaos. I think we started this weekend really open for anything, especially because it's a new track. Anything could happen. Free practice gave us some info, but not a lot exactly. And then qualifying, so seeing Max's lap, what was a beautiful lap until he hit the wall, what kind of gave me a heart attack, I'm going to be honest. I said this was all a bit of a drama going down at the time, and I was like, that wow, this lap, he could have had his pole position, it could have changed the whole course of the weekend. And then yesterday, Sunday, we start the race. I had there was some opening for a good fight at the front between Mercedes and Red Bull, and yeah, it just came to be chaos. And looking at other races this weekend, also Formula 2, there was a lot of red flags already, safety cars, and I expected something similar. I have to say, there was a clean start, what I didn't expect in the beginning, and it happened, and it's really good. Some people made up a lot of places, I think it was just in general, I don't know how to say it, but like the F1 world just went crazy. I think the title fight went harder than ever. There's a lot of rivalry now going on. There was a rivalry, and it's getting worse and worse every week. And I think this was one of the points that both of them reached the point that they bump into each other again. And yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like, I'm surprised by Ocon's performance. It was really, really surprising that he went up there. I have been really critical of him this year, and I think this was showing again that he has talent and he can do it. But yeah, just consistency. So that's my broad overview of the weekend.
Now, the main story heading into the weekend was the fact that the circuit building up in the last few weeks hadn't really been seen to be completed. Alex, talking from a driver's perspective, would you feel safe driving around a track which was completed just probably maybe a week and a half prior to the race?
I think there was obviously a big thing about how the track was rushed coming into the event and, whether or not it would get approved. But I think at the end of the day, I think it was Thursday night, it was very nip and tuck with, just before FP1. But Thursday night, I believe the track was approved by the FIA. And so from a safety standpoint of the track and, whether it's safe, the tarmac, the runoff, everything, it's been approved by the FIA. So personally, I wouldn't have any, as a driver, I wouldn't have any problems going to an approved track because they're the ones who run the checklist, make sure everything is as it should and as it was for the weekend.
Now, Ryan, the championship heading into 21st round of the season was certainly hotting up, just 8 points between the championship contenders. Do you think that was the main story the main storyline coming into this Grand Prix? Or was it almost the tension building up around the circuit, how unsafe it seemed to be? What do you think was the main difference there? Was it the track safety, or was it the tense championship fight which Formula One was putting first?
Well, I mean, it all was a bit messy the whole weekend. We had the Formula 2 session uh, postponed or taken back because what was believed to be track-related investigations. And then we also had, once again, yesterday with the Formula 2 race being delayed because it turned out that there was some barriers that needed to be repaired. And it just seemed that this was basically a Monza with barriers on each side of it. And obviously, as we've seen at Monza, we can see some fairly high speed crashes, but at Monza, you've got gravel traps instead of walls. So I do find almost through the whole race, after seeing what happened in the Formula 2 race, that I almost felt nervous the whole race because I felt that there was potentially a plane crash waiting to happen.
Obviously, before qualifying, we'd seen a few different accidents. We'd seen the likes of Charles Leclerc and other drivers hit the barriers, especially in Formula 2. Logan Sargent at turn 22 as well. However, the first major championship-defining incident, or what at the time seemed championship-defining, was in qualifying, because up until that point, Red Bull and Mercedes were doing what Red Bull and Mercedes do best and just going at it. Red Bull appeared to have Mercedes on the ropes in the final stages. Max Verstappen put in what I thought was probably the best lap I've ever seen until he hits the wall on the exit of the final corner. Lisanne, your heart dropped from what I remember seeing in the chats. Just walk us through what happened with that incident. It's just got to be a case of Max threw it away, really.
It is a bit. I think that one thing we have known from Max through his whole career is that he isn't scared to put his car, like a lot of F1 drivers are this way, like to put their car full into it and take risks. And around this track, what he did was like he kissed the wall, like I like to say, it already earlier in that lap, and it was close to. And I was, even though it was such an exciting, really exciting lap to see, there was like really close to him hitting the wall a couple times, but they have control over the car, so you never know. But in that moment, looking at that lap, sitting on the edge of my chair, just waiting to see what happens, because this could have defined the championship. If he had maybe been on pole, we would have a different outcome on Sunday. And I think in that moment when he hits the wall, I thought, oh no, this can be the end of the fight. Like, even though he could equal it, but what if his gearbox was broken? What if they had to change that? Then he would get a grid penalty. That could change the whole course of things, especially on tracks like this, where if you're in the midfield, it's way more dangerous than up front. And I think that it created a lot of doubt, but the car looked also really fast, and that was something that I thought, as long as he doesn't get that grid penalty, he can catch up if he needs to. And that was still some hope there, but definitely in that moment, I had to turn off my TV and rethink everything. I was like, I'm not sure if this was the moment Max Verstappen gave his championship away.
And then, Alex, the start of the Grand Prix, the first almost chunk we were given to allow us to see what the race would be like, it didn't start off the best because Mercedes got away. Hamilton pulled up a gap of about 3 seconds to Verstappen, with Bottas as a bit of a buffer between them. And then Mick Schumacher suddenly hits the wall on lap 10 at the infamous turn 22, bringing out the red flag. The main thing on everyone's mind there, including some of the fans and also Lewis Hamilton's, was that red flag necessary? Because quite a few people said the barrier looked fine, but in my personal opinion, it's better to be safe than sorry, and especially with a barrier like that, at a corner like that, You can't risk anything.
Yeah, I feel as if it's almost somewhat hypocritical from some of the fans coming out saying it wasn't necessary, where the same people have been going on all weekend saying that, the track's not safe, there's too many blind corners, and then as soon as they throw a red flag to, precautionally check the barrier, it's, it's the FIA against Hamilton, it's the favouring Verstappen, XYZ. I think it was completely right from the FIA. If there's a doubt, and no matter how small the doubt is, as you said, Will, at a corner like that, with a runoff not huge, no gravel, you're straight into the barriers. It's certainly the sensible thing to check it, because if you don't check it and something goes wrong, you've got a bigger problem on your hands. So I don't think it should be controversial. It's definitely the right call. And in Formula One, you make your own luck. Red Bull decided to keep Verstappen out. They rolled the dice, and ultimately they got rewarded for it.
Now, Ryan, then we had the first restart of the race weekend. Verstappen and Hamilton. Verstappen on pole, Hamilton second, a story we've heard many times this year. Hamilton got the better start. And as he was up the inside, Verstappen had to go off track in order to keep the position. That caused a bit of a ripple effect later, but none other than Esteban Ocon, the man who had the seas part for him in Hungary, the exact same thing happened for him here. And he ended up in second.
Well, yeah, and obviously that eventually ended up being pole position for him again. But yeah, it was a very messy start. I mean, people were saying the fact that obviously Verstappen went off track and didn't rejoin in a safe manner. To be honest, I reckon the way that he went off track, if he was to pull the car back to then go across through this sort of area that they're supposed to when they've gone off track, he would have still rejoined on the track with a gaggle of cars coming up behind him, and he would have had to have yielded anyway. So I kind of felt like no matter what he did in that situation, he would have potentially not rejoined the track in a somewhat safe manner. But then, yeah, it caused quite the kerfuffle behind with Perez getting pinched between an AlphaTauri and Charles Leclerc, and yeah, all hell let loose, which was what we kind of imagined was going to happen with these sorts of situations here.
And yet again, the race was red flag, Lisanne, because on the exit of turn 3, I think it was, Sergio Perez was sandwiched between Charles Leclerc and one of the AlphaTauris, and behind it caused a bit of a ripple effect in terms of all the other cars had to slow down. Nikita Mazepin going underneath George Russell, a very, very scary accident. And yet again, we were back to square one.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I mean, the whole chaos of that restart was like crazy in general. I think it started already with Bottas locking up as soon as he went into the first turn. And I think at that point, seeing that like this track is not wide enough to do what they did. And at that point, when he spun around, then at that point, Mazepin went by and just hit into the back of Russell because he was braking a bit. It was just a ripple effect of drama, and it was also the moment Red Bull has lost probably even more their championship for the constructors. And I think it changed the whole course also a bit, because like Red Bull could have had more of a fight, and that was over as soon as that happened. I mean, this track, we can talk about it later, but I don't know if it's right for Formula One with these cars. Like, as soon as he went around, he took up most of the space. The fact that it was just 3 cars involved is maybe a miracle in a certain extent. And yeah, Mazepin hitting into the back of Russell. It's sad for Russell to be a passenger in this accident, and also for Mazepin. I mean, we can talk a lot about Mazepin's antics on tracks and his racing craft, but yeah, I think this was not necessarily his mistake. And yeah, it's sad for Checo. I mean, he had a good chance also for his position in the driver championship as well. But yeah, there was like, he could do nothing about it. And I think he was, you end up, that's why there's maybe the starting, like the still start, not a rolling start, is not the best on tracks like these. But yeah, that's another discussion again, and it's difficult to see. And it was, 3 cards out again. So it's a lot of DNFs, and it was maybe lucky that nobody got hurt more in that accident.
Then, of course, a little battle ensued between Red Bull and Mercedes in terms of the track position. Obviously, the FIA not wanting to hand Verstappen a penalty, so instead giving them an offer of Ocon starting on pole, Hamilton second, and Verstappen third. We thought, or at least I did, that Hamilton would overtake Ocon and then have a buffer to Max and head off with the race victory. But no, Red Bull opted to put the medium tyres on Verstappen's car. Verstappen got quite a fantastic getaway, ended up storming down the inside of both Hamilton and Ocon.
Yes, it was a very Dan move up the inside, and well, originally he found himself having to cover off a fast starting Daniel Ricciardo. He had quite a good start himself, but yeah, just found the gap, went straight up the inside, and I was amazed Hamilton didn't actually get any front wing damage, because his front wing came into contact and effectively got ran over by Ocon's front wheel. So he was lucky to get away with that, but Ocon, being forced off the track, had to give the position back to Hamilton and allowed Verstappen to scamper off up the road.
Now, both of them continued on for quite some time, heading away from the rest of the field until lap 36, when Hamilton made his first overtaking attempt. There's not really much to talk about this bit in terms of the grand scheme of things, but essentially what happened is quite like turn one on the restart. Verstappen around the outside, Hamilton on the inside. Hamilton had to cut over Verstappen had to cut over the curb to keep the position, and eventually ended up coming out first. Now, Lisanne, he was ordered to give the position back, and then on lap 37, I think we all know what we're going to be talking about now.
Yeah, it was I mean, it's normal that he had to give his position back. I think we all saw that coming. We've seen this before. I mean, this started already in the beginning of this year in Bahrain. And I think that it was logical, but the way it happened, I mean, we can discuss about it. I still have some battling of what happened was the right with the penalties in the end. But yeah, they hit each other in as soon as Max hears it on the radio, he slows down and gets on the brake, and Hamilton rear ends him. And both because Hamilton didn't know that he was slowing down, and Hamilton said that he didn't know that he should go around him. And that created lots of drama, where then Max was still in the lead and then still gave back. But yeah, we can talk about the accident. I think the others probably have a lot to say about it, because there has been a lot of discussion about this one, and I'm curious to hear what the others have to say about it.
Ryan, I'll come to you first about this, because I'm yet to actually hear your opinion on it. What do you think happened? Do you think Verstappen brake tested Lewis, or do you think Lewis failed to move around him?
I think initially he was slowing up to allow Hamilton past. I don't know if maybe, obviously it's been said by the FIA, there was a late minute brake check, and I don't know if that was out of frustration from Verstappen, or whether or not he was trying to slow up even more to kind of make it even more obvious for Hamilton to go through. Because it was a bit of a strange situation. You had Verstappen slowing up, going down 4 gears, and at the same time you had Hamilton slowing up and also going down 4 gears, and it was obviously a smart move from Verstappen, or at least he thought it was a smart move, because it would have meant Hamilton would have gone through and he'd have been behind him during the DRS detection, so he could have just whisked on by back into turn one. But either Hamilton didn't quite understand what was going on, or Hamilton did know what was going on and was not going to go through at a point where he knew he could then be repassed under the DRS. Yeah, I think it was just messy between the two of them, to be honest. I just, at that moment, I kind of for once found myself feeling a little bit fed up with the pair of them. We've all been told this is like the next Senna versus Prost, Schumacher versus Hill, but in those seasons, over the course of one season, I don't think we've seen those rivalries come together as many times as we've seen Hamilton and Verstappen this season.
I think, in all honesty, I have to agree with you on that. Because this championship, when I first looked at it, I thought this would be the championship of the decade, and which it has been. It's been one of the best title fights we've seen for some time. But both sides were at fault there. Because Max slowed down too much to let him by, and there was a brake check in there. But Alex, you're telling me that a 7-time Formula One world champion cannot see when someone is slowing down to let them through and cannot see a massive gap on the left-hand side of the car ahead and is confused about what is happening when he's been involved in numerous championship fights and has a Formula One career spanning 15 years. That really does not sit right with me.
Yeah, I agree. I think, first of all, it's a little bit silly from both of the drivers. But the argument to say, oh, Hamilton didn't know what was going on is completely ill-founded and, to be honest, stupid. Because it's clearly obvious. Hamilton even came on the radio disagreeing with it, almost asking for the place back. All of a sudden, a lap later, Verstappen slows down. He's not confused about what's happened. He knows what's going on. He knows that if he overtakes in there, he's going to get the DRS back. So in Hamilton's mind, he's going to trundle along a 200 mile an hour straight at 50 mile an hour behind Verstappen, get the DRS, and have him into turn one. That didn't happen, of course, and Verstappen really wanted this DRS detection zone. Do I think the brake check was right from Verstappen? No, absolutely not. The 10-second penalty was warranted. But I feel as if some justice should come Hamilton's way, because to trundle behind Verstappen, is, as far as I'm concerned, just as dangerous. And if he hadn't trundled behind, Verstappen could have slammed the brakes on all he wanted, and it wouldn't have been a problem. Hamilton would have been up the road. I just think it's ridiculous and a bit childish from both of them, to be completely honest. And we all saw what came of it.
Verstappen beforehand was handed a 5-second time penalty for overtaking off of the track and cutting the corner to gain an advantage. After the race, he was given a 10-second time penalty and 2 points on his licence for what happened with Lewis. I can understand why the FIA gave him a penalty, because they need to make an example of someone in that. And realistically, I don't see a way where they can penalise Hamilton for just slowing down. I'll ask all three of you about this. I'll start with Lisanne. Do you feel that Verstappen should have been handed a penalty for that incident? Because personally, in my opinion, they were both as bad as each other.
I mean, that's a difficult one. I think he should have had a penalty, because in the end he did something that was not fair and it follows the rules book. You get a penalty, and it was not race changing in the end for him. He is still second. It's not defining the championship. So I think if that would have happened, I would have been in more uproar. Do I think maybe Hamilton should have gotten something too? Yes, but yeah, I mean, this year with the FIA, I have no clue what's going on with the differences. They had to give him something. He has now super license points. I don't know how many he's at the moment, but yeah, it was not like like I said, if it changed the race, I would have been in more uproar, and Hamilton had no precautions at all. But I think, yeah, they should have done it. I mean, it is what it is. He did something wrong. They had already some mess ups with the whole thing, what happened in Brazil, and that driver said, so I can do this now, I can just push people wide. And I think that they learned their lesson, that they cannot just do that anymore, let people free off. So for brake checking, I think, yeah, in the end, if it was, in a sense, it was brake checking, yeah, you get a penalty. It is what it is, and it didn't change your race in the end, so all good.
Well, I feel that, again, as what's already been said, both were as bad as one another. I think both should have received some form of penalty. And then also later we had Verstappen give the position away, but then shoot back up the inside, which was potentially deemed to have not been really good enough to give the position back and do what he did. So he gave the position back again, but then when he gave the position back again, Hamilton ran him off the track and almost into a wall, which Michael Massey got on the blower and said that was not acceptable. So I feel like, it almost cancelled itself out. Like, the Hamilton was just as much in the wrong because he went on and then did what he did. So, but the thing is, Hamilton has to be careful because if I'm right in saying he is one reprimand away from getting a 10-place grid penalty. But then are the FIA kind of a bit cautious about that because they don't want to be seen as the people that are that could potentially ruin a championship? Because I've seen stuff like this before in MotoGP, where Rossi was going for the championship, and he had quite a very controversial incident, and they gave him a penalty, but it still kept the championship alive. And so I feel, is there a point now that this has got such a big thing in the media, it's given them so much coverage, that is there a chance that that could potentially affect things?
Yeah, I certainly feel that the penalty was warranted for Verstappen. You can't be happy with, you can't allow someone to break check on track, no matter the circumstance. It was a bit of a nothing penalty. 10 seconds doesn't see him put behind Bottas. For the second weekend in three, the stewards have inquired into a decision involving Lewis and Max, and the result being Verstappen not dropping behind Bottas, similar to, of course, in Brazil. But yeah, I feel as if the penalty is warranted, but as I said before, I think Lewis should be getting something from the stewards as well for just dawdling behind, because I'm not going to say it's just as not acceptable, but it's pretty close.
Now, final point heading into the championship decider, or the final couple of points, that is. First of all, we have got the first ever championship decider since 1974 for both contenders going equal on points into the final race. Very exciting. But before we talk about our predictions, there is one thing I have to say about this weekend's championship finale in Abu Dhabi. Formula One cannot afford this championship decider, this once-in-a-lifetime title rivalry, a year of build-up, all coming down to this. We need a straight fight between Hamilton and Verstappen. We cannot have another race with the farcical actions, and that is an understatement of what happened last weekend. It was utterly embarrassing for F1 to see the stewards messing up, the drivers messing up, the teams messing up. All of them need to have a sit down and just be told to do their job. Because if Formula One has another crash like 1990, like 1994, what are people going to think of it? What are people going to think of Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen? If Lewis Hamilton wins his 8th world title after colliding with Verstappen, he will forever be tainted. If Max Verstappen wins his first world championship after colliding with Lewis Hamilton, he will forever be tainted. There is no way Formula One can walk out of that without being made to look like a bunch of chumps. A bunch of absolute idiots. In Formula One, the teams, the drivers, the stewards must be on peak performance this weekend. We got a brand new circuit. We don't know what's going to happen. It is the ideal scenario for a championship situation which will go down in the era as one of the best. Maybe since 2012, 2010. It is just one of those once in a decade kind of things. Now, after my little rant there, apologies for that, guys. Just a one-word answer, Hamilton or Verstappen. Who do you think is going to win the title? We'll go to Lisanne, go to Ryan, and then we'll finish with Alex on this point.
One word. Oh, this is difficult. Realistically, I'm going to say Hamilton is going to take it. And this is going to be his 8th.
My heart says Verstappen, my head says Hamilton. It's so difficult because they're almost so equal. I'll just throw it in there, Verstappen.
And Alex.
Max.
Interesting. So we've got 2 votes for Verstappen and 1 vote for Hamilton. That's going to be the question of this week. Probably going to start a bit of a war in the comments, but either way, keep it respectful and keep it clean down there. Who do you think is going to win the 2021 Formula One World Championship? That's the question coming at you, and we're going to be building up to the season finale across this week. We've got Jake Sanson going live at 10 o'clock every day this week until the Formula One decider, and I'm going to be walking you through each championship contender over on our website at downforceradio.uk. Now, the championship finale, we can push that aside. We can push the giant cinder block of tension and chaos aside. We can go to Nikita Mazepin, because Mazepin is involved in a very dangerous crash, and it brings me on to the point, Zan, is this circuit too tight? Because avoiding action wasn't really possible for much of that lap, and it could end badly if that happens again.
I think it is not made for F1 personally. It's like I was talking with some people about it. It looks a little bit like a stretched Formula E track in my eyes, and it is too dangerous. Looking at how tight it is, the fact that a car can turn around, the fact that people could still go by. Paris's car was big. The amount of also with cleaning up the debris, the amount of safety cars we needed to be able to clean the track and to be able to take care of it shows to me that it is not perfect for it. It is a weird mixture of a couple of tracks. It reminds me also a bit of Baku. It's like a cage almost. And personally, I didn't, as much as there was some action in the title fight in the race and of course the crashes, it was quite the mellow race in other ways, and that's not what we want to see, especially from new tracks. I think we will have to see, of course, next year with the changes in cars, what they will do. But I don't think it's no. My personal opinion is that it's not great for Formula One.
Ryan, the other side of the safety debate was the fact that there was so much debris. Fernando Alonso coming over the team radio, begging the stewards for a safety car, whether or not that was because he needed a safety car to get back in the race, given the fact he was quite the way down the order. Or the genuine fact that, like in Baku 2017, there was just litter everywhere, debris flying everywhere. Vettel's car was still chucking debris on the track because of how damaged it was. Eventually, the German retired. But yeah, quite the confetti circuit there.
Yeah, and it seems obviously with the way that the track has been designed, it makes it hard for the likes of the marshals and all the safety crew to manage to clear things up. Even under virtual safety car, because of how tight knit the circuit is, whenever you have some sort of incident, everything's all going to stay within the confines of the track because they're stuck between the walls. I felt was a bit farcical at times, the way the whole race went because of the incidents and whatnot. And yeah, it seemed like there was that one period where I think they got about 2 laps of racing in, then they had to go for a virtual safety car, 2 more laps of racing, and then another virtual safety car. It seemed whenever someone made some form of contact, we had confetti of carbon fiber everywhere, and it was always on the track. Now, hopefully, because they're not going to have all the different aerofoils and all sorts of frilly bits on the car next season, if we do get a few more incidents when we come back here next season, it might not be as much of a problem as it was this year.
And Alex, the final point about safety this week, turn 22. I think realistically that's all I need to say. Is it a corner that needs to be changed for Saudi Arabia's next appearance on the Formula 1 calendar? It's in the first 3 rounds.
I don't know if the corner itself needs to be changed, because it clearly provides an interesting challenge for the drivers, where you can really gain a lot of time and lose a lot of time if you're too committed or not committed enough. We saw that in qualifying with Verstappen's monster lap, but that's a separate point. I think if anything's changing around turn 22, it's not the corner, it's the runoff. I feel as if, I'm not sure what they can do with gravel, with it being a street circuit, or if they can, put anything on the runoff. Even if it's just to extend it 50 or 100 meters backwards, just to give them that, bit more room. But I don't think the corner itself needs changing. If they're looking at changing anything, it should be in the runoff and the run into the tyre wall if needs be, because we did see a few cars go off in F1, and of course Logan Sargent was the first driver in F2 to find the wall, and not just in F2 of the weekend. So yeah, maybe a few changes to the runoff, but the corner itself, I think, provides a good challenge for the drivers, and I don't think it necessarily needs changing, turn 22 specifically.
Now we can start taking a look at the other drivers of the weekend. Unfortunately for Sergio Perez, Lisanne, the race restart didn't really last too long for him. He ended up in the wall, sandwiched between 2 cars. Nothing he could do, and it could have possibly cost Red Bull the Constructors' Championship this year.
Yeah, I think it was a critical moment in that sense. I mean, what has to happen for Red Bull to win is that both Mercedes would not be in the points. They have to score points, and how realistic is that really? It was sad to see, but that's also Formula 1. It happens. These moments can define anything. I think we saw it in the way he reacted afterwards, that he was just stood in kind of, I think, disbelief of what happened and that it was over. What can you do about it? You cannot do anything about it when you end up in a coalition, especially a track so narrow and you're 3 wide with these cars that are also massive. You will end up like I said, I didn't expect a clean start, and we had a clean start the first time. The second time we didn't, and that is what we expected. And it is what it is. It is it's sad. It is what it is for us, but I get that for Red Bull this was a defining moment. But I don't know what else to say than he could do not anything. He cannot change it. We cannot do anything about it, and that was probably Red Bull's last chance for the championship this year. So it's sad, but it's the truth, and that's Formula 1. It's harsh sometimes, and we cannot change anything about it.
Ryan, on the other side of the number 2 garages, Valtteri Bottas, you just raised a stat with me, which I did know, but in all honesty, it completely slipped my mind, given the fact that the championship exploded. Valtteri Bottas, 100 Q3 appearances, and I think you can walk us a bit more through that.
Well, yeah, it's so far he's done 100 races with Mercedes, and in all 100 races he's managed to get that car into Q3. Only 2 other drivers in F1 history have actually managed to do more than what he's done, and that is Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna. So to find yourself in a stat with those 2, bearing in mind he's not even won a world championship, and he's started this season. He's managed to get the stat of most pole positions without a world title, and now he's got most top 10 appearances in qualifying without a title consecutively. It just kind of underlines that Bottas, although people do have their qualms about him, he definitely deserves to be in the top flight of F1. And it would be very nice if hopefully Alfa Romeo do have something good for him next season.
Alex, Esteban Ocon narrowly missed a podium. Just walk me through his race and the heartbreak at the end.
Yeah, it's never nice to lose a podium or any position, but I suppose the podium hurts a bit more, especially when you're in an Alpine. You don't usually find yourself in that situation. He was hunting for his second podium of the year, obviously second to his winning the Hungaroring. But yeah, such a shame for Ocon. I mean, he just sort of found himself at the front. I'm pretty sure he benefited from the first red flag where he didn't pit because I'm not sure if he started on the mediums and was going a bit longer along with Ricardo who was on the hards, and Ocon just sort of found himself at the front. Obviously, Max and Lewis, as you said, will all blew up, and all of a sudden he's on pole. Obviously, no one was expecting him to hold up Max and Lewis, but kept ahead of Ricardo, who was on medium tyres compared to Ocon's hard tyres for the length of the race. I think Ricardo had to do quite a bit of management on his tyres to get them to the end, so he never really challenged Ocon. And yeah, if the straight was, I think, 50 meters shorter, maybe even less, he would have won. He would had not won it, but he would have got the podium. But Bottas doing to Ocon what he famously did to Stroll a couple of years back in Baku, and it's a shame for Ocon, but I think he can still be quite happy with fourth. It was a good race, almost a bit under the radar, given how much focus was on the front two. But it's good points for Alpine, and if it wasn't already sealed, I think it is pretty much sealed now that Alpine will be nailed on fifth in the Constructors' Championship, which is good for them.
Lisanne, Daniel Ricciardo had quite the quiet race, in all honesty with you. He just sort of got on with it, did his job, and got a good finish for McLaren. Some solid points, but in all honesty, I think their championship fight with Ferrari is all but over now.
Yeah. I think his qualifying was not great, but for him to make up his places and of course he was in luck with not pitting. Well, there was a yellow flag before the red flag in the first red flag. I think that brought him also some luck, but he had a great start and he brought himself up there. It's good to see him up there. I think he had a bit of a slow start this season. That also influences, of course, the championship, the Constructors' Championship battle with Ferrari. And I think for McLaren, they had a strong start. They had a great season. And I think Ferrari just came in stronger the second half of the season with both drivers, whereas McLaren has been struggling to get both drivers up there. And I think for Daniel to have these kind of his mojo back in the second half of the season gives us some promise for next season. I hope that also Lando Norris will be back up to the standard he set for himself this season. As for Ferrari, they have shown that they improved. I think they can be a really strong contender. They could be in the battle next year with Mercedes and Red Bull. I strongly believe in that, and it's great that Ricardo got points. I think he had a good race. He did it well, clean decision making. But yeah, I think they made a decision with Lando to pit him during the yellow flag, was the same mistake that maybe Mercedes made. And that created that he was not up there. He had to fight back. He was in the back of the grid at one point even.
Now moving over to someone who I've, safe to say, been a bit critical of this year, Antonio Giovinazzi. He hasn't done the greatest job in 2021. He hasn't done the worst job in 2021. However, one thing I do have to say is this race has proved exactly what I said, that Giovinazzi does have the talent for Formula One. When he is there, when he has the opportunity to perform, when he decides to perform, he can do a really good job. He scored some good points for Alfa Romeo, kept out of trouble, especially around a circuit like this that is very, very difficult. Ryan, Antonio Giovinazzi to score some points in his penultimate race, in what likely will be his penultimate race in Formula One, I think he did personally quite a good job.
Yeah, he had another Q3 appearance in the Alfa Romeo, which again, cracking job. And I don't know, he's kind of he's done quite well towards the end of the season. I don't know if it's got something to do with the fact that he's now got his future sorted and the pressure is now off and he can just do his thing. But he's almost been like proving that he should still be in Formula One when it's too late. I think he's put in some fairly good performances towards the end of the season, and he's done it again by getting into Q3 and then going on to score points.
I think I would say this is probably his best weekend of the season. Obviously, Monaco, he made it into Q3 and scored a point. The only points finish of the season before this race, I think. And ultimately, I have to give him a round of applause. In all honesty, with you, one person, on the other hand, who was quite the unlucky character this race, Alex, was Sebastian Vettel. He spent most of the race. Let's face it, he spent most of the race being crashed into because he was hit both by Yuki Tsunoda and Kimi Raikkonen on separate incidents, forcing his Aston Martin to internally combust, realistically. Debris flying everywhere, as we mentioned earlier. It's a real shame because he was knocked out in Q1, and because of the initial red flag, he managed to gain some good positions because I think he didn't pit, changed his tyres under the red flag in the pit lane. So a real shame for Sebastian Vettel and Aston Martin.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, first touching on qualifying, both of the Astons had absolutely no pace. 17th and 18th is pretty shocking. I believe, out qualified by both Williams is, a problem. But they went onto the race. Seb had a good start. I don't believe he made a traditional pit stop throughout the whole race. He got his tyre changes under the red flags, which I think at one point he was up into 8th when he was battling with Tsunoda, and got turned around. Which, as a Vettel fan, you could say I'm somewhat biased, but I do believe that was Tsunoda's fault. And then with Raikkonen, bit more clumsy. I'd probably apportion probably an equal blame to the two of them. Just too wide into that left-handed doesn't work, and that proved it. And as you said, Will, his car just started to fall apart, and that was the end of his race. A shame for Seb. He was looking to get some good points, but I feel as if Aston Martin are sort of in a bit of no man's land in the constructors. So they're a long way off the car ahead, but they're pretty comfortable to believe Williams behind. So I don't think 2 points or 2 or 4 points will be massively missed, but it's a shame for Seb. But as I say, I don't think they'll lose too much sleep over it.
Yeah, Aston Martin certainly going to be hoping that next season the new regulations can provide a bit of a breath of fresh air for them, especially after a difficult season this year. Anyway, moving on to the next race, just before we wrap up. We have had some technical difficulties, so it's a miracle we managed to get to the end of this podcast. But either way, I just want to ask you guys about your predictions for Abu Dhabi. We've already spoken about the championship, so I'm going to ask you now, who do you think will win the Grand Prix, finish second place, third place, and who will take pole position? Lisanne, if we start with you, I just want to hear your predictions for the podium and the pole sitter.
So, looking at the changes of the track, I'm gonna say that number 1 is gonna be Lewis Hamilton. I'm gonna say number 2 is gonna be Max Verstappen. And number 3, I'm gonna throw, just for fun, Carlos Sainz in the mix. That would be interesting to see. And pole sitter, I think it will maybe be. For pole, I'm gonna go Max, but I think for in the race, it's gonna be Lewis.
I was just sort of thinking, as if the controversial does happen, that maybe we might end up getting a Bottas Perez and maybe a Ferrari or McLaren on the third spot of the podium. But for pole position, I believe probably going to be Hamilton. And I'll probably go for Bottas for fastest lap and bow out, giving Mercedes the Constructors' Championship and their last win of the season before going to Alfa Romeo.
Yeah, I'm also going with the controversial approach. I don't see both Verstappen and Hamilton finishing the race. I think Max is going to go on pole. I think for the race results, Bottas will win his final race with Mercedes. We'll put Leclerc in second and Perez in third, with both Hamilton and Verstappen retiring.
Well, quite the. I think you've been outdone there, Lisanne. I thought your Carlos Sainz prediction would be a bit out there, but Ryan and Alex both going with the collision aspect of the scenario here. And there we go. Unfortunately, that is all we have time for. Thank you very much to Alex, Lisanne, and Ryan for joining me. And thank you very much for all of you who listened at home. Remember to check out the Downforce Radio social media at Downforce Radio, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, you name it. We're on it, as well as our website, downforceradio.uk, to check out all the latest and greatest news in the world of motorsport, as well as the radio station. Thank you very much for listening. Have a wonderful evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you're listening from. Goodbye.
Go, go, go! Anytime and immediately! This is amazing! The worst start for a Grand Prix that I have ever seen in the whole of my life. He's out of the race! He's out of the race! Oh my goodness! This is fantastic! And I've got to stop because I've got a lump in my throat.